A very warm welcome to all of you, especially you, Mr. Maazullah. I declare the meeting open, and I bid you, Mr. Maazullah, most heartily welcome. You may now give a brief exposition of your research, of your reasons for having undertaken it, and of the results it has yielded. Please go ahead.
Madam Rector Magnificus, colleagues, and friends. This afternoon, I present key findings of my thesis titled Akhuwat Microfinance, Participation, Impact, and Gender-Based Heterogeneity in Business Returns. My interest in this topic started while I was working in Central Bank of Pakistan in 2001. By that time, microfinance was globally recognized as an important development tool for poverty alleviation. It gained further importance when member countries in the United Nations made a strong commitment to achieve various Millennium Development Goals, such as eradication of extreme poverty and hunger, and access to universal primary education. The importance given to microfinance was based on a growing body of research, which essentially established microfinance as a development success, a narrative which has since significantly influenced the ensuing global development discourse. The success narrative of microfinance was challenged by recent randomized studies in India and Morocco. To the surprise of many, these studies did not show any impact of microfinance. Researchers and policymakers were further alarmed when microfinance borrowers in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh committed suicide in large numbers in 2010 after defaulting on their mounting debts. While reporting on these incidents, some commentators portrayed microfinance as part of a problem rather than a solution. They termed microfinance a big curse, a new liberal fairy tale, an intervention which really transformed lives. In response to this crisis and public outcry, the government of Andhra Pradesh introduced tough legislations which had the potential to nudge the microfinance industry towards an imminent collapse. A number of scholars came to the rescue of industry and wrote an article in the Financial Times criticizing the state government for enacting a law which encouraged borrowers to default en masse. In this article, they maintained that lending to the poor itself is not the main novelty of microfinance. Its main innovation is rather doing so at lower interest rates compared to informal money lenders. In line with these arguments, some researchers argue that poor households need credit and not necessarily cheap credit. Although these are valid points, the debate should not end here. The real question here is whether the lower interest rates are low enough compared to the repayment capacity of borrowers. All of this has generated an intense philosophical debate among scholars, a debate which merits critical inquiry. My thesis contributes to this debate by generating further evidence on the effectiveness of microfinance in Pakistan. Before establishing the effectiveness, I take a step back and try to answer a fundamental question as to why some poor micro-entrepreneurs, though eligible, do not participate in microfinance programs. I then proceed to investigate the gender-based heterogeneity in business returns. For this research, I partnered with Akhuwat Microfinance, which provides interest-free loans to the poor in Pakistan since 2001. I present my research findings in 3 core essays. The first essay explored reasons of non-participation in microfinance programs, as a large number of poor around the world who could potentially benefit from microfinance still do not participate. We know very little whether this non-participation is triggered by institutional barriers or self-exclusion. Existing literature on the subject has focused primarily on the supply side. In this paper, I focused on the demand-side barriers and posed an intriguing question. What factors drive participation, and why do some micro-entrepreneurs who are otherwise eligible do not apply for microcredit? To answer this question, I bring new insights from literature in social networking and psychology. I specifically examine the role of learning, which comes either through experimentation or peer effects. I also control for personality traits of micro-entrepreneurs and the way they perceive the enforcement of credit discipline. Based on probit estimates, overall, I found significant learning effects. There is strong evidence that microfinance value negative learning more than positive learning, which is consistent with prospect theory. Among 5 personality domains, only conscientiousness came out significant. There's also evidence that individuals who fear loan recovery methods to be coercive, they shy away from microcredit. The second essay estimated the impact of microcredit, Akhuwat's microcredit on different outcomes. In order to get unbiased estimates, I used a randomized experiment. After collecting baseline data, Akhuwat applicants were randomly assigned to treatment and control groups. Overall, randomization created a valid control group. The treatment was given in the form of Akhuwat interest-free loans. 2 follow-up surveys were subsequently conducted to form a panel dataset. Using this panel dataset, a fixed effects model was estimated to detect treatment effects on capital stock, monthly profits, and entrepreneurial effort, which I measured in terms of the number of hours worked. The standard error was obviously clustered at the enterprise level because the randomization was done at the enterprise level. In response to the exogenous infusion of capital, the monthly profits and capital stock of the treatment group significantly increased. Compared to control group, the average monthly profits of the treatment group increased by approximately 3%. Treatment had no effect on the numbers of hours worked. In the next level of analysis, I estimated returns to capital in micro enterprises, which is considered as a good measure to ascertain whether interest rates charged by microfinance institutions are affordable, and hence it has important policy implications. To get an unbiased estimate, the random treatment was used as an instrument for capital. I found that the average monthly returns to capital were in the range of 8.6 to 11.9%, which are substantially higher than the market interest rates in Pakistan. The last essay in my thesis focused on the gender-based earning gaps and heterogeneity in treatment effects. It is generally believed that female entrepreneurs world over, and especially in developing countries, are more credit constrained. If this is true, then standard economic theory would predict relatively high returns to capital for female entrepreneurs. However, surprisingly, research studies from Sri Lanka and Philippines suggested to the contrary. Based on these findings, some researchers have raised an important question as to whether capital alone is sufficient enough for growth of female micro-entrepreneurs. In the baseline, I found that compared to men, women entrepreneurs earn 20% less in monthly profits. In Pakistani society, parda or veil, relative to the geographical location, defines spatial boundaries for women, which results in limited mobility, segregation, and seclusion. Consequently, parda is a structural constraint, caps women's potential for profitable network formation, and restricts their access to various opportunities. The gender-based earning gap substantially reduces once I control for the level of capital stock and parda. To further investigate, I used the two-fold Blinder-Oaxaca decomposition and split the earning gaps into explained and unexplained components. The decomposition revealed that 41% of earning gaps were explained by differences in gender-based endowments, while the remaining 59% is unexplained, which may be attributed to either market discrimination or gender-based differences in preferences. Using panel dataset, I found significant heterogeneity in treatment effects. the monthly profits of male entrepreneurs significantly increased by approximately 3%. Female entrepreneurs, on the other hand, showed a very small and relatively less significant increase in monthly profits. These findings, though contrary to expectations, are consistent with the studies done in Sri Lanka and Philippines. To conclude, I would like to highlight that overall microfinance does help. In the presence of structural barriers, though, the capital alone approach may not work for women entrepreneurs in countries like Pakistan. To end my presentation, I would like to leave you with a thought that I quote the founder of Grameen Bank, Professor Muhammad Yunus, quote, "To overcome poverty and the flaws of economic crisis in our society, we need to envision our social life. We have to free our mind, imagine what has never happened before, and write a social fiction. We need to imagine things to make them happen. If you do not imagine, it will never happen." Unquote. Thank you, Madam Rector Magnificus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Candidate.